I still remember the exact sound of my father's voice when he said it. Calm. Cold. Final, Ethan. We're letting you go. It didn't he make sense? Wasn't he some intern? Wasn't he underperforming? I was their son. The only one who showed up early, stayed late, and knew the company's operations inside out. I had been working there since I was 16, pouring my life into that business while my friends went off to college or traveled. When he said those words, my mother wouldn't even look at me. She just kept staring at her folded hands, as if this wasn't her decision too. But it was. They told me it was strictly business, that the company was struggling, and they had to make cuts. And somehow, I was the most logical choice. I laughed not because it was funny, but because the absurdity of it almost broke me. You're firing your own son to save money. My dad nodded expression blank. It's temporary. You'll thank us one day when things are stable again. They didn't he look stable. They looked guilty. But I didn't he argue. I just walked out with a box of my things and a heart full of disbelief. The next morning my key card didn't he work. My company email was deleted. I wasn't T family anymore, at least not in the building that carried our last name. I didn't T know that this would be the best thing they ever did for me, because firing me was the first domino that started the collapse of everything they built. The first few weeks after they fired me were brutal. I'd wake up at 6 a.m. like I always did, shower, grab my coffee, and then just sit there staring at the wall, realizing I had nowhere to go. No meetings. No purpose. Just silence. My friends told me to sue. My girlfriend told me to move on. But I couldn't eat. Not because I still wanted their approval. I wanted answers. How could two people who raised me with words like loyalty and legacy toss me aside the second things got tough? Eventually, I started hearing whispers from ex-coworkers, from suppliers. The budget cuts were a lie. My parents had kept the senior execs, their golf buddies, on inflated salaries while letting go of anyone under 40. They weren't saving the company. They were protecting their comfort. That was when the spark hit. If they could treat family like disposable labor, then their empire didn't he deserve to survive. And I wasn't he going to just sit there and watch. I was going to build something better. I took a job at a small logistics firm across town. Pay was trash, but it gave me access. I started learning everything I could about operations, finance, networking. I watched how the real competitors moved. I soaked up knowledge like it was oxygen. 2 years later, I worked my way into management. 3 years later, I was running a division. By the fourth, I had investors, people who believed in my vision for a more ethical, innovative logistics network. We called it Northline. The irony, most of our early clients were the same vendors my parents had screwed over. They were thrilled to jump ship. I never badmouthed my family. I didn't need to. Their reputation was doing that all by itself. Every deal I closed, every contract I signed, it wasn't about revenge yet. It was about freedom. But then I saw something that changed everything. A leaked report from their accountant showing massive debt layoffs and unpaid taxes. My parents' empire was crumbling, and fate was about to hand me the perfect opportunity to finish what they started. It started with a phone call from a number I hadn't seen in years. Mr. Halle, this is Mark Jensen from Basetone Capital. I represent Halle Logistics, my parents' company. For a second, I thought it was a prank. Then he said the words that made my pulse quicken. They're looking for a buyer. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the skyline outside my office window. The irony was poetic. After all those years of being treated like a liability, I was now the CEO of their biggest rival, and they were the ones drowning. "Send me the file," I said, keeping my voice steady. When I opened the folder later that night, I felt my stomach twist. The company was a mess. Massive debt. Lawsuits. Half their contracts had been terminated. They were months from bankruptcy. And the kicker, they still hadn't paid several of their laid-off employees, the same people they fired alongside me. The next morning, I called my attorney. "Let us make an offer," I said quietly. He raised an eyebrow. "You want to buy your parents' company." I smiled faintly. "No, I want to own it." For weeks we negotiated through intermediaries. I didn't use my real name in the deal. I hid behind a holding firm. My parents had no idea who the buyer was, just that someone was willing to save their company. They accepted the offer faster than I expected. Desperation does that. The sale closed on a rainy Friday afternoon. I watched the signatures roll in on my screen, my parents unknowingly signing away everything they'd ever built to their own son. That night, I sat alone in my penthouse office, staring at the finalized contract. It should have felt like victory, like closure, but all I felt was a strange mix of triumph and emptiness. They had fired me to save money. Now I had bought them out for pennies, and they still didn't know who their new boss was. The meeting was set for Monday morning, a transition briefing with the new ownership. My parents thought they were walking into a negotiation to save face. They didn't know they were walking into me. I arrived early, watching from behind the glass. As they entered the conference room, my father looked older, his once iron posture now slouched under invisible weight. My mother followed in, still dressed to impress, clutching a designer purse like armor. They had no idea my assistant opened the door. "Mr. Hawley, they're ready for you." The moment I stepped in, my father's jaw tightened. My mother blinked twice, as if her brain was buffering. "Ethan," she whispered. "Morning," I said calmly, taking the seat at the head of the table, his old seat. "Let us get started." For a long, heavy silence. No one spoke. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning, the ticking of the wall clock. Then my father finally found his voice. What are you doing here?" I smiled. "Technically, I own this place now." I slid the signed acquisition documents across the table. "Every asset, every contract, every warehouse, you sold it to me." My mother gasped. You tricked us." "No," I said evenly. "You chose not to ask who the buyer was. Kind of like how you didn't ask how firing your son would destroy your company." My father's face turned red, veins pulsing at his temples. "You think this is justice? You think this makes you better than us?" I leaned forward. "No, but it makes me smarter." He stood up, pacing like a caged animal. "We built this company from nothing, and you burned it to the ground," I said softly. "All I did was buy the ashes." My mother started crying, then quietly, the way people do when pride and regret finally collide. "I never wanted this," she whispered. "We just thought it was temporary. We didn't mean to hurt you." I looked at her for a long moment, the anger and sadness warring inside me. Maybe once that would be mattered. But not anymore. "You don't work here anymore?" I said, finally standing up. "Security will escort you out." They didn't argue my father's pride. Wouldn't he let him beg? He just stared at me one last time, the same cold, distant look he gave me the day he fired me, and walked away. I told myself I felt nothing. But the truth, watching them leave, felt like winning and breaking all at once. When the door closed behind them, I thought I'd finally feel free. But instead, the silence was deafening. The room, that massive conference space where I'd spent half my life being told what to do, how to behave, who to be, now belonged entirely to me. And yet it felt emptier than ever. 4 weeks after the takeover, things moved fast. Reporters caught wind of the buyout, calling it a strategic merger. They had no clue about the family drama behind it. I didn't correct them. The story sounded cleaner that way. But the whisper started anyway. Old employees who worked with me since my intern days were torn between admiration and discomfort. "You really bought them out?" one asked quietly. "That's hardcore, man." I shrugged. They made their choices. I made mine. Still, the nights were long. I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if maybe, just maybe, I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. My therapist called it justice fatigue. I called it guilt. Then came the call that shattered any illusion of peace. It was my mother. Her voice trembled when she spoke. "Ethan, please. Your father, he is not well." I felt my stomach drop. He had a minor stroke. The stress ES in the hospital. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. My mind flashed back to that day years ago, when he told me I was fired, cold, composed, like I was nothing but a number on a spreadsheet. And now I was supposed to care. But despite everything, I went. Walking into that sterile hospital room was like stepping into a time capsule. My father lay there pale and smaller somehow, wires and monitors surrounding him. My mother sat by his bed, mascara-smudged eyes red from crying. When she saw me, she stood. "He needs you, Ethan." "The company needs you," I laughed quietly. "Mom, I am the company." She flinched, and for a brief second, I hated myself for saying it. He opened his eyes then. And weak, but aware. "You got what you wanted," he rasped. "Did I?" I said softly. His gaze lingered on me, the faintest trace of pride mixed with bitterness. "You always were the better businessman. I just wish you hadn't learned it from me." Those words hit harder than I wanted to admit. I left the hospital that night with my head spinning. The city lights blurred through the windshield as I drove every glowing sign, a reminder of how far I'd come and how far I'd fallen. All my life I'd wanted my father's respect. I'd built North Line to prove I didn't need it, but lying there in that hospital bed for the first time, he'd almost sounded human, vulnerable, and it scared me how much I still cared. The next morning, my board called an emergency meeting. Apparently, the takeover had stirred more chaos than expected. Old clients were pulling out, claiming ethical concerns. Some employees refused to return under my leadership, saying it felt like a vendetta, not a vision. They weren't entirely wrong. One of my exes, Julia, who'd been with me since the early North Line days, stayed behind after the meeting. "You built this company on integrity," she said quietly. "But lately, it feels like you're running on anger. What is your endgame here, Ethan? Proving a point or building something that lasts?" Her words stuck with me. I went home that night and found an old photo buried in a box. My dad and my mom standing in front of the first Holly Logistics truck. We were smiling. Real smile. Back when things were simple. Somewhere along the way, All of us had lost sight of what we were fighting for. A week later, my mother called again. "Your father is being released. She said he wants to talk." Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met in the office boardroom, the same one where ID revealed everything. But this time, he looked different. Fragile. He sat beside me. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said quietly. "But if you're going to keep the company, keep the name. It's still family." Family. That word felt like both a blessing and a curse. I could rebrand the business, erase the Hale name completely, and no one would ever associate me with them again. Or I could keep it, preserve the legacy that destroyed us, and rebuild it on my own terms. Two paths, both painful. That night, I stood outside the building, staring at the giant silver letters, Hale Logistics, reflecting the city lights. By sunrise, the sign was gone. But I hadn't replaced it yet. Because I wasn't sure who I wanted to be, the son who forgave or the man who won. The next few months were chaos disguised as progress. The press hailed me as a visionary CEO, the man who had turned a dying legacy into a new powerhouse. But behind the headlines, things weren't so shiny. Half the staff from Hale Logistics had quit. The ones who stayed worked with tension thick enough to choke on. Every meeting felt like walking through smoke. People still whispered that ID only bought the company to humiliate my parents. And maybe deep down they were right. But I tried to fix it. I cut executive salaries, reopened old contracts with vendors my parents had mistreated, and implemented profit sharing for employees. Northline merged with Hale's remaining assets under a new banner, Hale North. It sounded clean balanced, like a truce between past and present. Still, something didn't ease it right. I'd walk through the warehouse floor and see my dad's old office window above, and my stomach would twist. I couldn't tell if it was pride or shame. Then one evening, Julia, my right hand, came into my office. She closed the door behind her, her expression unreadable. "You've done the impossible," she said. "You turned two sinking ships into one thriving company. But you haven't forgiven yourself yet. Have you?" I laughed bitterly. Forgiveness. Isn't exactly my skill set. She smiled faintly. "Maybe that's the next thing you need to build." The next day, I found my mother waiting in the lobby. No appointment, no warning. Just her sitting on the same bench where ID once waited for her approval. She looked smaller now, tired. "Ethan," she said softly, "I heard you drop the family name from the building." "I did." She nodded. "Good. Maybe it's time someone did things differently." We sat in silence for a while. Then she said something that caught me off guard. "You're angry because we betrayed you, but you're still here running what we started. Whether you admit it or not, you care, and damn it." She was right. ID built everything to prove I didn't need them. But everything I built still had them in its DNA. That night, I stood on the rooftop overlooking the city. For the first time in years, I didn't feel rage, just exhaustion and maybe a flicker of peace. I didn't know what forgiveness looked like yet, but I was finally starting to believe it might exist. It happened on a quiet Thursday night, the kind of night when the world feels almost still. My phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. "Ethan, it's Mark Jensen, the investment broker who handled the original buyout." His tone was strange, hesitant. "There is something I think you deserve to know," he said, "about your parents and the sale." I almost hung up. I was done digging up ghosts. but something in his voice made me listen. Your father didn't he want to sell? He continued. He tried to stop it at the last minute. Said he'd found private funding, a personal loan that could VE save the business. Then why didn't he? I asked. Mark sighed. Because your mother canceled it. She told him she couldn't. He watched him destroy himself trying to keep it alive. She said she'd rather lose everything than lose him. My chest tightened, and the layoffs. She insisted on firing you. Not him. She said you'd never walk away willingly, that if you stayed, you'd drown with them. For a moment I couldn't breathe. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in. I spent years believing they betrayed out of greed and pride, and now it sounded like something closer to fear or twisted into something unrecognizable. After I hung up, I just sat there staring at the city lights. My entire narrative, my drive, my anger, my identity had been built on a half-truth. And suddenly revenge. Didn't he feel like justice anymore? It felt like ignorance. The next morning I drove to their house. My mom answered the door, startled. Ethan, can we talk? I said. We sat in the same kitchen where they once told me I was let go. It looks smaller now, too. I know why you did it, I said quietly. Mark told me. Her eyes filled instantly. We thought we were protecting you. You were so driven. Ethan, so consumed. Your father said he saw himself in you, and he didn't. He wants you to become him. I looked away. You could be just told me. She nodded. We should have. We failed you there. For the first time, there was no defense in her voice. No excuses. Just raw regret. When I left that night, something inside me shifted. Forgiveness didn't come instantly. It's not a switch you flip. But for the first time, I felt the anger start to fade. Maybe it wasn't betrayal that built me. Maybe it was love that broke the wrong way. About 4 weeks after that conversation, I couldn't focus. Every deal, every meeting, every success felt hollow. I had built a kingdom on resentment, and suddenly, I didn't even know what I was defending anymore. I started going through old files, the ones my parents had left behind. Financial records, letters, even some of my dad's handwritten notes. That's when I found a draft email he never sent. It was addressed to me, Ethan. If you're reading this, then I couldn't say it out loud. You were right about the company. I made mistakes. I was too proud to admit how deep the trouble ran. Your mother thought firing you was the only way to save you from me. Maybe she was right, if I ever get the chance. I hope to work for you one day, not because I'm your father, but because you're the better man. I didn't realize I was crying until a tear hit the paper. That night I called my mother again. I want him back, I said. Not at a desk, just back. She knew what I meant. 2 weeks later, my father came into the office. For the first time since the takeover. The staff whispered as he walked through the halls, the fallen king returning to his castle. He looked frail but proud, and when he saw me standing there, he smiled faintly. So he said, looking around, "You've done well, we did." I said I offered him a position as an advisor. No titles, no authority. Just someone to help me navigate the old contracts and connections. He accepted without hesitation. And somehow it felt right. Over time, the bitterness faded. My parents started showing up for family dinners again. We didn't talk much about the past. Some wounds heal better in silence. But we were rebuilding brick by brick. Not a company this time, a family. Months later, during a early meeting, one of my board members said, "You've turned Hale North into something no one expected, a legacy built on failure." I smiled. Failure is a good teacher. That night, I walked through the building one last time. A new sign gleamed above the entrance. Hale North of Family Rebuilt. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I D1 against someone. I D1 with them. So here it is, the story no one knows but me. Years ago, my parents fired me from our family company. They said it was temporary, a business decision. I thought they were selfish, cruel, and blind to everything I'd done for them. I left heartbroken and angry, and spent years building a rival company from nothing. Eventually, I had the chance to buy them out. I didn't reveal my identity at first. They didn't Their own son now controlled everything they built. When I finally told them, the shock on their faces was something I'll never forget. My father's pride, my mother's regret, all colliding with years of silence and bitterness. And yes, I admit it, I felt a rush. I had one. But the truth didn't stay simple. A broker later told me the real reason they fired me. My mother feared my father would push me to repeat his mistakes, and that I'd suffer the same way he did. Their betrayal wasn't pure malice. It was fear disguised as cruelty. I didn't forgive them immediately. I built a company to prove myself, to rise above them. But in the process, I realized something important. Revenge felt powerful, but it wasn't peace. Redemption and understanding were what I truly needed. Now I run Hale North with my parents as advisors. We're rebuilding not just a company, but our relationship. We don't pretend the past didn't hurt, but we started to heal. So here is my question to Reddit. AITA for buying my parents' company after they fired me, even though it caused them immense stress and humiliation. Was I justified in reclaiming control? Or did I take revenge too far? Because sometimes the line between justice and cruelty is thinner than you think, and I still don't know which side of it I'm on.